Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Daniel. I'm the founder of Startup CPG and a professed data nerd. I'm wearing the I Love Data hat. You know I love it. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And we will be emailing these slides out to all of you guys, so don't worry, but you can hit the YouTube if you want to get the recording of this later. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart because just for me, the retail climb is so much about being able to tell a good story, get your product in places, be able to tell that story, to be able to build on that and get additional retailers. And, so much of it is like one success begets the next if you know how to tell the story. And I always looked at telling your story with data, kind of like lobbying on the Hill, where yeah, a lot of politicians, they don't really they don't have the time to learn about every issue. They actually rely a lot on people to give them the information, which is often given strategically. It's like that with data. And I worked at Mars Chocolate, and for a while I spent time in their Walmart office. That was a team that they had there just to work on Walmart. And they had a team of people doing data just for the Walmart account to tell the stories. And then I went to a brand in the US, a Better For You, and they had 0 people telling the story nationally. So I'm really passionate about brands learning how to tell their story on data, getting really creative with it. And I'm also just really grateful to NielsenIQ and Bizer for doing everything possible to make that data accessible to you guys. So when I was in the data game, pulling all those slides, we used to pay 6 figures to access the data. And then they were paying very heavy amounts for people to actually pull the data and know how to manipulate it. But now with Bizer, you can get data at a very small fraction of that cost, and it's pretty self-serve. And so today we're going to go through, in an ideal world, here's the kind of stuff that you have that you can show retailers, but you can get really crafty and you don't have to have all of it. But I think just starting is really important, because if you don't have data in your sales deck, it makes people wonder then, how will it do? Are they growing? Will it do well on shelf? And I just always like the idea of actually just getting ahead of that question and showing them the info, so that instead they're nodding along as you're presenting. They're like, yeah, that makes sense with the story that you're telling me. And again, it's like a lot of strategic looks at the data and how you show it, that I know, Emily will be talking about as well. So that's enough for me to kick off, but I'm also going to drop here in a second just the link for Bizer, because you can work with the NIQ team, and they will give you some free reports even, so you can kind of see what it is as well. And that stuff is pretty awesome. You can start getting alerts emailed to you as well. But let's get into it. So Kate, maybe I'll pass to you to really give us a better kickoff here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was, I think, great level setting, Daniel. So thank you so much for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kate Walker. I lead our emerging brands team here at NIQ, and I am joined today by Emily Groden, founder and CEO of Evergreen, a very highly successful Better For You waffle company that's disrupting the breakfast table in the most delicious of ways. Emily is since launching her brand in 2020, Evergreen has secured distribution in over 8,000 stores, from Whole Foods and Sprouts nationwide to select Walmarts and Targets. And Evergreen was also a finalist in NIQ's recent Founders Pitch Slam, which took place a couple of weeks ago at our annual Consumer 360 conference. Emily and 4 of her peers across beverage, grocery, and personal care categories took the stage and delivered their pitches to Shark Tank's Jamin John, Happy Products, Craig Dubitsky, Whole Foods, and NIQ leadership. And I'm really honored to be co-presenting with Emily today. Her pitch was fantastic, and I'm really excited for you guys to see it. Emily, do you want to say anything before we dive in?
No, other than super excited to be here. I totally agree with everything that was said about the power of data and the great things that NielsenIQ is doing for emerging brands. I can speak from my own experience that when we got access to data and started telling our data story, so many more doors literally and figuratively opened up. So happy to answer any questions at the end, but excited to walk through my pitch and kind of show how we use data today.
Thank you. All right, So in terms of what we'll dig into and kind of ways of working for the session today, I will go through some principles for success, kind of give you a perspective on from NIQ lens on what's top of mind for retailers, and then talk about principles or the 10 must-have principles we would say you want to leave your audience and with when conducting a retailer pitch. Might be helpful if, I thought there was a build that needed to take place, but we're all good. So the 10 must-have elements that will leave your audience with a clear understanding of who your brand is, what you stand for, how to stand out, and ultimately why the retailer can't go another day without having you on their shelves. And then Emily will walk us through her pitch, which again, is incredibly strong and leverages, we didn't sync up on this before, but as I was looking through her pitch deck from the pitch slam, just realized that she hit on all of the 10 points so eloquently throughout her pitch. So and then as Emily mentioned, we'll leave some time for questions if Daniel, if you think that it makes sense to go there. So just that's a little bit of housekeeping in terms of the session flow today. So let's dig in. All right, so in terms of presentation principles, first and foremost, your presentation should deliver value. What consumer challenge are you solving for with your product, and how impactful will it be to the retailer if you address it, the retailer and the consumer if you address this problem for them? And then, not only should your brand be solving a meaningful customer problem, but you should do so and convey how you're doing so in a differentiated way. What about your brand is different from your competitive set? Is it the presence or absence of strategic ingredients, its form, its taste, its texture, its price, its package? Really any combination of these elements and what's different about it. And how is that going to land with your target consumer? We want to be direct, so clear value demonstration, and your articulating your uniqueness in market, but also succinct, and deliver your message with the retailer's priorities in mind. So I mentioned our pitch slam a few weeks back. And one of the things that Damon John talked about that really stuck with me was knowing your 2 to 5 words. So when you think of iconic brands like Nike or McDonald's or Coca-Cola or L'Oreal, it's just do it, I'm loving it, taste the feeling, because you're worth it. We say these words and we think about the hustle, the indulgence, the joy, the self-care that these brands really represent and activate within their consumer bases. So, would challenge you to think about your 2 to 5 words, and can you articulate your 2 to 5 and how that would intersect with the retailer's 2 to 5? So we'll dig into, each of those facets a little bit more before getting into the kind of the 10 must-have principles for your pitch deck. Effectively, one of the things that will remain top of mind and is always, has always been top of mind for retailers is how will brands that I am picking up or brands that I'm adding to my shelf drive unit volume in 2025 and beyond. According to the latest read of NIQ data, unit sales are up just under a point versus a year ago, so effectively flat in the US, and retailers are constantly optimizing and looking for ways to cultivate and drive incremental volume within the confines of their stores and digital shelves. According to Bain & Company, global sales value for the consumer products sector, spanning food, beverages, household, and personal care products, is estimated to have risen 7.5% year over year, down from 9.3% growth in 2023 and 9.8% growth in 2022, with about 3/4 of 2024 sales growth likely to have come from price increases rather than volume gains. So it's really, really critical to think about how you can be driving unit volume for your retail partners and your prospective partners. Not surprisingly, with static unit growth, retailers are looking for ways to simplify and optimize across the store within all core departments. And we see this reflected in the number of UPCs selling. So if we look at these 8 individual departments, I did take some of the core coverage that NIQ captures. So some other departments like alcohol and random weight and seafood aren't captured here, but I would say some of our core departments are reflected here. And we're looking at the average number of or the change in number of UPCs selling versus year ago, and you can see that there are declines across the board. And these trends tend to be exacerbated if we look back a year or two further. So not only are units relatively static, but retailers are truly trying to streamline their assortment and optimize the number of products, and we're seeing fewer products than before experience success with volume behind them. So this means that demonstration of your brand's ability to drive incremental volume to the category in store is essential. Quantifying this for the retailer will be key. And they likely already have a highly developed opinion about what brings high value shoppers to their shelves. So coming in with confidence and delivering that as part of your message will be essential. And ultimately, it's all about, as we talked a few slides ago, all about value creation and how you're going to create that value, not only for consumers, but for the retailer as well. This really all-encompassing. It is a perceived net gain from purchasing and interacting with your product. It's very important to understand, to the extent that this is accessible to you, to understand how price sensitive or insensitive your target consumer is when it comes to the benefits that you're delivering. Consumers will respond when a price threshold is breached, for better or for worse. So that could be a massive price increase or a massive price decrease. And if you're taking price up, you need to be informed about what this will do to your expected velocity. Ultimately, though, unless your brand promise is rooted in the concept of affordability, think a Little Caesars with their $5 hot and ready pizzas, or Walmart's private label brand Great Value. It's really important that your brand and product resonate deeply with a consumer in a way that cultivates influence, drives industry dialogue, and propels consumer loyalty. So while changes to price and being competitive on price can drive short-term gains in volume, the more sustainable approach to driving consumer loyalty is going to be focused around cultivating that value wedge and identifying the attributes that are of disproportionate importance to your target audience. So how to use some of these topics that are really top of mind in today's retail community to fuel your pitch deck. We talked about, when using these appropriately, it can enable you to demonstrate a deep understanding of the retail environment in which you're working to be a part of, or are already a part of, and are looking to expand your involvement within. And it shows that you have empathy and understanding of the challenges they're navigating. Retailers are thinking about how to optimize their shelves, both in store and digitally, how to bolster units in market, where gains are still often where gains are often still being attributed to inflation, and build meaningful touch points with their target consumer segments. So your points, the way you can take these 3 retailer concerns or priorities and funnel it or channel it into your talking points would be, demonstration that your brand will grow units. Attract the type of customers that the retailer is targeting and provide incremental value through meaningful differentiation that addresses an unmet shopper need. The average shopper attention span at shelf is 6 seconds, with often more than 100 products in view at any given time. So understanding how you can help both shoppers and retailers kind of streamline that journey will be critical. Okay, so this, I would say, is this is a bit of an outline for the next, I think, 7 or so slides I have planned, because we're not going to do, I guess, 8, because we're not going to have, I'm not going to have slides for the problem answer in your product. Those are truly unique to yours, but we will dive into potential ways to visualize and exemplify and tell your story for each of these additional components. But I would say this is the money slide in terms of if you want a playbook for the types of content and data to be integrating within your retailer pitch decks, as well as some of the consumer feedback and some of the more qualitative information that's useful in cultivating a powerful retail narrative. This is the slide. So first and foremost, your problem answer. What consumer problem are you solving for? Second, your product. This would be the solution to the pervasive problem, your 2 to 5 words. And then number 3, market size. Demonstrate that you have validated that the problem solved for is a priority for a large enough segment of the market to cover cost of goods sold, operational fees, and generate a healthy margin. If you're placing a bet on future consumption habits, it will be important to articulate the information that informed those assumptions. Number 4, industry trends. Are there attributes associated with your product? Think high protein, high fiber, paraben-free, recycled packaging, any of those or others that have demonstrated enduring success in the market. And does your product offer a distinct combination of attributes or something that new entirely that you want to showcase? Number 5, target consumer. So when you showcase your target consumer, bring this individual to life. Most retailers think about their shoppers in segments or personas, i.e. a time-strapped working parent or a tech-enabled, value-driven single household. Anything you can do in advance of your pitch to learn about the retailer's priority segments and demonstrate how your brand addresses their needs directly will help drive loyalty to the retailer and you stand out. 6, uniqueness. So we've touched on this previously, but really want to underscore the importance here. It is vital to visualize how your brand is different than others and competitors. One way I've seen this done, and I think Emily will walk through a slide where she does this really effectively, is through a matrix visual where you can look at distinguishing product attributes or strategic claims on one axis and your product versus key competitors on another to showcase or visualize really how your brand is standing out or is unique to those in market on some of those strategic claims that are fundamental to your value proposition. 7 is sales, and I'll talk about that and sales momentum in the same vein. These two obviously go hand in hand, regardless of whether this is your first retailer conversation or your 20th. You need to show you are working towards a pattern of success. At NIQ, we see many brands get successful starts through retailer incubator programs, direct to consumer, or through Amazon. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a a precedent that's been set at another retailer, but just showing that you're demonstrating that consistent pattern of success, or peers in the market, peer brands in the market, how those brands are demonstrating patterns of success. 8 is FOMO, so fear of missing out. What is the halo effect of having your brand on shelves in their stores? Will it make the retailer stickier with a target shopper segment? Will it grow their average basket size? Will it be a store choice driver? Something that, as I was reflecting on some of my own personal shopping experiences in anticipation of this conversation, I thought about just what comes to mind, and when I'm going kind of, I have, as I'm sure many can relate, I have my shopping routine down pat, but there are certain stores that are very salient when I have a specific need. So when I need to re-up on my kids' better for snacks, kind of the ones that I'm like, oh, well, I feel very, I feel very good about giving my daughter certain types of fruit snacks because I know that they're made of just fruit and that sort of thing. So when it's time for me to restock the pantry for those specific products, I know there's no better place for me to do that than Whole Foods, at least from my point of view. And so that's a personal example, but I would imagine that that's a strategy of Whole Foods to be known and salient for that trip type. And so are you going to make that value proposition of theirs even stronger by sitting on their shelves? And then why believe is data is sort of all encompassing. It's the activation of your 2 to 5 words, best delivered through the voice of your customers. So whether that's a TikTok endorsement or demonstration, product reviews, velocity data, you name it, but it also extends beyond your brand's world today and considers the longevity of the market need that you're addressing. It's a time and space to let your brand's personality shine. So it's kind of the why do you wake up in the morning, and why should your customers wake up tomorrow, or why should this retailer wake up tomorrow morning with your product on their shelves? So that's a snapshot of the principles that we'll dig into. I'm going to go into each, starting with market size in a bit more depth. So first and foremost, you want to demonstrate that there is again precedent for success in the space that you are operating in or entering. Some of you may be pioneers in salient and rapidly growing consumer product segments. Others might be trying to break through the noise in highly mature and saturated categories. Regardless of your starting point, it's really important to demonstrate that your market has some precedent for success. The less precedent for success, the more compelling your narrative needs to be on placing a bet, or the why change, why now, which, just kind of a call to action, so to speak. Any forecasting analysis you can bring to the table that substantiates sustainable pipeline and demand for your attributes, like, again, high protein, high fiber as an example, or segment, will differentiate you. But this slide and visual is a way in which you could help educate the retailer on what the size of your market looks like today, your addressable market, and what you expect it to look like in X number of years. Next, we'll look at an example of a way to potentially visualize or make your industry trend information come to life. Utilizing a mix of quantitative and qualitative information to showcase how your product sits at the intersection of an established purchasing pattern and a nascent trend can be extremely powerful. NielsenIQ recommends a combination of, consumer validation of a need or propensity to spend more, whether that be through customer testimonials or interviews or survey information, and volumetric support. So, some of the sales data that Daniel was talking about at the beginning, that we are able to work with brands of all shapes and sizes to access.
And just some of this data you can get from like an IQ buys or like an attribute sales growth. They can do that kind of stuff. But other stuff, Google is your friend.
Yeah.
You can, if you're just like probably, there are some reports out there that you can pull just a top data point. You can also survey your own customers, which, I would call that like a super fan survey where you just send out a structured survey like SurveyMonkey, something like that to your own people and ask them like, yeah, why do you buy this? Where do you buy it? And, like, when do you use it? And what else do you do? And what do you buy this instead of? That kind of stuff can give you some really good juice for this kind of a slide. Also, like Statista is not bad. It's kind of a cheaper subscription that gets you like older reports, but they're inexpensive and gives you some nice data for these kind of slides.
Yeah, most of my career has been spent at large market research firms, but I actually was at a startup myself a couple of years ago. And yes, I can say there is a lot of publicly available information to help you pull together that sizing narrative. Also, I will say NIQ produces a ton of publicly available thought leadership. So if you go to our website, it's curated by sub-industry. So you can look within salty snacks, you can look within personal care, beverages, and there is a lot of data at your fingertips at no charge if that is of interest to you all. All right, next we are going to talk about target consumer. And I should say, I think this is probably obvious by now, each of these is just intended to be kind of some inspiration for how you might visualize some of this information in your pitch decks. Certainly would expect that everyone will be making making visuals their own, but it just gives you some kind of food for thought or visuals for consideration as you think about telling these stories. So, the time you spend talking about your target consumer should really bring that consumer to life and show why they are high value to the retailer. Daniel and the Startup CPG team offer a ton of fantastic resources on their website. I was actually looking at them last night, and I think there's a ton out there about for the Startup CPG community about just the ways of working and preferences and nuances of certain retailers across the US. So I would highly recommend taking a look at those. Consumer panel information collected via survey or other means can help you illustrate more deeply and at scale the types of segments your product would resonate most strongly with. Some metrics that will get retailer ears to perk up: household penetration, which is the percent of a target market buying your product or category today; buy rate, how much is that slice of the population spending each year; frequency, how many trips are they taking in a year; and basket size, what is the size of that average trip. So if you're bringing net new customers into a retailer, that's going to be incredibly enticing to them. If you are enriching the experience of existing shoppers and cultivating or enticing them to take another trip, that is also going to be extremely exciting. If you're helping build the basket when they're already in the store, those are the types of things that you want to think about. But shopper acquisition is from a profitability standpoint, from the retailer standpoint, is going to probably be the most exciting. But any opportunity to create another touch point with an existing customer, whether it is an additional trip or an expanded basket type once they're already in the store, is going to be very powerful too.
And some of this stuff won't be like, you can't get this kind of data that's shown in the middle if you're a smaller brand, because you have to like hit a lot of penetration before they'll have this kind of repeat data based on the panel that they have. But you can get a lot of that through your surveys. Like if you want to have demographic data, ask that in your survey. It can be really interesting for retailers to understand who's buying it. You can ask them, like, did you buy it again? And give them proactively a data point like that. Or like, yeah, even asking, what did you buy this instead of? You can understand if you're adding incrementality because like, hey, they actually bought my premium product instead of this other thing. So I'm increasing the basket size by that, or just, sales in your set. So there's a lot of creative stuff you can do before you actually hit the kind of household penetration that you would need to have one of the panel data things be actually pulling your stuff.
Yeah, great call out. Okay. Uniqueness. So we've obviously hit on this topic multiple times. Emily has a great example of this in her pitch deck, so I won't belabor the point, but I think this matrix visual is a great way to strategically differentiate yourself from the competitive set based on the attributes that are kind of innate and fundamental to your value proposition. And we will let Emily talk through hers in a couple of minutes. For sales, so similar to the market size example I shared earlier, it's important to demonstrate your brand's personal performance over time. In addition to sales and sales growth, other metrics that retailers will be interested in are things like velocity or sales per total distribution point. So measuring how effective your distribution is. Any change versus a prior period will help show the momentum that you're building, and in making your brand more accessible for shoppers, for your target consumers and the retailers.
And there are a bunch of ways to pivot that data, which probably some of you have learned. If you get the data, let's say from NIQ Visor, you can pull different time periods. You can pull like looking at one store versus another store. And the time periods thing is important because like you can show whatever you want, and it is your responsibility to showcase your data the best possible way that isn't like, hey, if you look at the data from between these two full moons and this one, like if you do it where it makes sense, like they're going to mainly nod through it. I've never had a retailer be like, that looks like you cherry picked that data. But you can, filter certain items out if they're a different pack size. Like, hey, amongst the 12-ounce products in the set, we're number 2. Like it's really, you got to like look through this and really figure out how can I tell the strongest story? Which of these data points is the one? And maybe it is velocity. They're always going to want to look at that, but you can show that strategically and look for, the top account or the top stores in your top account. And even if you're too early where you don't have this, that if like maybe you're not in the retailers yet that are covered in this universe, you can like go into the stores where you are in and just ask them, or maybe get a favor and get like the person who orders the product to like tell you how you're doing and how you're doing against some of the other products, and make slides that look like this based off what you hear. And as long as you put the source for it, it gives you a really good way to kind of start early. But again, like pivot the data a bunch of different ways, look at it at the item level, look at it at the brand level, look at it at different retailers, and figure out how can I tell this story well. Always look for the strongest story that says you're the fastest growing brand, maybe, which is a percentage growth, stuff like that.
I'm chuckling and gonna jump in and just say that as we have grown over time, like how we've talked about our data has also really evolved, and definitely in the beginning just started with growth numbers until we could come out and say like, no, in a vacuum, actually our velocities are ranked X or Y. But yeah, you can talk about data in a lot of different ways to make it look real pretty, even in the early days.
Thank you. So to build on that, again, just kind of a creation of a slide that establishes a little bit of fear of missing out. So, I mean, very similar visuals as to what we saw in the last slide, but there are lots of different ways to slice and dice data and help educate the retailer on how they're performing relative to a competitor in a strategic category that, oh, by the way, is the one that you operate within, and how you can help that retailer perform more strongly if their competitor down the street is excelling and they're, it's an opportunity area for them. So can provide tactical recommendations for items to add based on your own performance and market. or you can use category data if you don't have the distribution yet to tell some of this story, and pair it with data around your brand's uniqueness and overlap with the retailer's target consumer fit. Sales momentum, again, this is just an example visual, but you want to show what has happened to get your brand where it is today, but also important to signal that you're thinking about what will happen. Specifically, anything you can share about what marketing you're doing to drive brand awareness and consideration to fill the top part of your sales funnel. Or if you're modifying product line to evolve with your consumer base, address, meet their needs at a later life stage, fuel loyalty, enter adjacent categories to increase their spend at present state. This will, excuse me. This will show that you're thinking not just about the here and now, but you're thinking about the future, and that, you aren't satisfied with the status quo, and they shouldn't be either. And then the why believe. So your 2 to 5 words come alive, end your pitch with a message that really encapsulates what your brand brings to the table or shelf, and how you meet your shoppers' needs, how you solve a retailer problem, how you will drive shopper acquisition, repeat purchase, and ultimately loyalty. This is the slide where your data should meet heart and, your mic drop. So whatever makes the most compelling case, I encourage you to integrate your value proposition and your brand personality within this slide. So before I hand the next section over to Emily, I just wanted to quickly visualize how I think she succinctly addresses the 10 must-haves in 10 slides. You'll see each one of these in her pitch. One thing I loved about her pitch is her attention-grabbing start, where she introduces the problem she's solving for. And I also love her build to articulating her target consumer, which is rooted in a personal story. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily to run through her pitch from the NIQ Founders Pitch Slam. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. I will say too, just before I start, as a caveat, this pitch was for a very specific audience. If I were doing it in front of a retail buyer, for example, I would add some slides in that Kate was referencing that talk about marketing and how you're going to support your product once it's on shelf. So happy to talk about what those might look like after the pitch, but those are missing from this deck. But without further ado, I will launch in. Good afternoon, Startup CPG. My name is Emily Groden, and I'm the founder and CEO of Evergreen Waffles. I hate to start this off with some bad news, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. America is in the midst of a crisis. Only 10% of our children get the daily recommended intake of veggies. 10%. That's just 40% for fruits. And these shortfalls lead to an increased risk of all sorts of diseases later in life. But there is some good news. With each additional serving of fruits and veggies, okay, if you could go back.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, that's okay. With each additional serving of fruits and veggies per day that we can get our kids, the risk of them developing these diseases decreases by up to 7%. So the question here is, how do we get our kids more fruits and veggies? Next slide. Thank you. Easy. Evergreen Waffles. Now, I know you probably weren't expecting to see a plate of delicious waffles on this slide, so let me explain. Next slide. At Evergreen, we have recreated the American classic, filling it with more of the things our kids need without any of the junk. One full serving of fruits and veggies, no preservatives, no refined sugars, no fake flavors, no seed oils, and a really nice amount of protein and fiber to keep our kids' bellies full so they can focus on school or just being kids. Next slide, please. Plus, they come in decadent dessert flavors that our kids actually want to eat, so it's a win-win. Next slide, please. Which is what Evergreen is all about, the little wins. Evergreen exists to provide parents with one reliable win every single morning. because mornings are totally chaotic, but with Evergreen in your freezer, there's one thing you don't need to worry about. Next slide, please. Today, we are on a mission. Not too long ago, I was just a working mom making waffles for my kids. In 2015, I graduated from Harvard Law School, set on a career in corporate law. But then I had my 6-year-old daughter, and I wanted to feed her frozen waffles for the convenience, but I could not find a brand that checked all my boxes. Unwilling to settle, I bought a mini waffle iron and started making my own on the weekends that I would freeze for our family to pull from during the week. They made our lives so much easier. I decided I couldn't possibly be the only one out there who wanted something truly better. So I set off on this wild journey that we are all on to try to figure out how to get a product on a grocery store shelf. Next slide, please. Fast forward 5 years, Evergreen is now on 8,000 grocery store shelves, from Whole Foods and Sprouts nationwide to select Targets and Walmarts. Despite our significant distribution footprint, we still only have 0.2% household penetration, so there's a ton of white space ahead of us for expansion. Next slide, please. We all know that doors are nice, but in this industry, velocity is king. Evergreen has the 3rd highest velocities in total grocery out of all frozen waffle brands, according to NielsenIQ, and the fastest growing velocities at 57.3% year over year. So we expect to continue climbing the leaderboard. Next slide, please. The combination of our door growth and our velocity growth has led to nearly 500% dollar growth year over year. Now, this is during a time when the frozen waffle brands making up 93% of our category are all seeing sales declines. So it's a really good opportunity for retailers to quote unquote fix their mix, cut the lower performing SKUs on their shelf, and bring Evergreen in to jumpstart growth. Next slide, please. So who are our customers? Well, excuse me. Not only are we fast growing, but we are also highly incremental to the category. Frozen waffles are a category that nearly 60% of US households already buy. Despite this high household penetration, 20% of Evergreen customers are still brand new to the aisle. Not only are we bringing a new shopper over to the frozen waffle aisle, but it's a high value shopper. Evergreen shoppers buy frozen waffles nearly 2 times as often and spend nearly 2 times as much on frozen waffles as our competitors. So as I said, it's both a new customer to the aisle and they're very high value, a real win-win. Next slide, please. So who are these high value shoppers? Well, they are families with young kids. We outperform our competitors with families with kids ages 0 to 5 by 2.5x. That gap starts to fade a little bit as kids get older. And as a mom with a daughter who is 6, almost 7, I can tell you why. She is now on sports teams where the snack after games is usually something like donut holes. So suddenly our zucchini carrot waffles, where you can see bits of zucchinis and carrots in them, have become a little less exciting to her. So for the last 6 to 12 months, we started thinking, okay, we're winning these really loyal customers at a really young age. Now, how do we make sure we grow with them? Next slide, please. Introducing Evergreen Thick and Fluffy, launching at Whole Foods nationwide this August, next month. They have the same special sauce as our mini waffles, except now the veggies are fully hidden. They are larger, so they are 4x4s, and they come in more familiar waffle flavors like home style, chocolate chip, and blueberry. Our Thick and Fluffies will be incremental to our minis, something our mini consumer can graduate to as they age. Our own internal concept testing showed that our Thick and Fluffies perform 2 times as well with older kids ages 6 to 12 than our minis. Next slide, please. And our NIQ Bases concept results affirmed that our Thick and Fluffies will fill a void in the marketplace, not just for our target consumer of millennial parents with little kids, but for the general population as well. GenPop gave us an outstanding score across 2 metrics when only 10 to 15% of products surveyed in NIQ Bases get outstanding scores. And our target population of millennial parents gave us a top score across all of the metrics. Next slide, please. We cannot wait to get these out into the world in just 1 short month and help the whole family get more fruits and veggies. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to your questions.
I am sold. I don't have any questions. I just want them. I think I think there are a couple hundred people on this webinar. I think everybody wants them right now. Uh, I'm
That's
very
very
convinced,
nice.
honestly, and I actually eat those Kodiak cakes because I didn't know about this brand before. Now I'm like, oh no, I've been doing it wrong. Like, wait, can I'm not a kid though. Can I have? I'm gonna have this, right? Not just for kids. Um,
Not just for kids, for everyone.
but yeah, like Kate said, I think you did a really good job hitting all the stuff that she had talked about, like setting up the problem. That was super effective. And I think the main thing that I would like for everyone watching to feel is like, didn't you just feel yourself nodding along through that whole story because it was comprehensive? But it also like simple. Each slide just kind of told like one message, but it just built up to a really compelling narrative of like, well, now I need this on my shelf, or I need to invest in this company, or and there was a lot of different kinds of like data used there. Some of it was kind of like desk research stuff that you would find in reports. Some of it was first like sales data that you would get from Nielsen. There was a concept test in there, which you can do through NIQ bases, or a lot of different ways you can do that stuff. So just like, yeah, really nicely done, nicely packaged up.
Thank
So
you.
not surprised at all of the progress that you guys are making. And I guess maybe just one question for you, Emily, would be like, how would you do this differently? Let's say you're an early brand, you don't already have all of this great traction to show. If you start over, like, what are you really going to prioritize at the early stages around data, and how are you going to get it?
Yeah. Like I said, I was laughing when Kate was saying that there are different ways to use data at different stages. In the very early days, I took whatever data I had. Some retailers, namely Whole Foods, is kind enough to provide you with some data. So I always used to have a slide in my decks that said, our velocities at a major natural retailer are
That starts with
XYZ,
a W. Yeah.
yep, exactly. Or our growth at a major national retailer is, XYZ. And then as we started to get more data, but we were still small and hadn't really kind of climbed, like I said, the leaderboard of velocities or the leaderboard of, dollar growth contribution to the category, then I started talking just in growth like percentages. And I would say, we're the fastest growing frozen waffle by dollars. We're the fastest growing frozen waffle by velocities. And now we've gotten to a point where I can just talk about, dollar contribution and velocity. But it was certainly a journey. But yeah, I mean, truly, like, use what you have. I do think you can get creative and do some Googling about your category. Like there are a lot of articles out there, and not even reports, but just articles talking about like how big the frozen waffle category is, how much it's growing, if it's not growing. And so you can piece together data points that way. But I do think that, and I said this earlier, the more data we have used, the more doors it has opened. And I think one thing I wish I had done sooner was figure out how to make my decks more data driven. Whether that is, one-off reports through NielsenIQ or going to my trusty friend Google and getting scrappier. I think it would have helped because retailers really do love data.
Yeah. And I mean, that was a great presentation. And I think it was, I don't know, 6, 7 minutes long. So it was like just really, really tight. Even, I mean, you get a lot longer than that usually to present. Not always though. But yeah, I actually have found really compelling data points, even looking at like competitors' articles and stuff like that. Sometimes they've found a data point or they've commissioned a study, and you can just use their data point as long as you're citing the place that it comes from. I love what you said about using data from your retailers. Yeah, Whole Foods will give you access to the portal. You can at least understand your performance. NIQ, by the way, has the exclusive on Whole Foods data. So if you want to know Whole Foods data, you can get that from them to see. Even if you're not in there, you can at least understand what's going on in the category. And like maybe you do know your performance at like one natural channel retailer, and then you could compare that to competitors in Whole Foods and kind of just show people that's the comparison you're doing. You can also kind of like impute velocity if you have your distributor sell-in data, making some assumptions. You can start there if you're not even in like accounts that actually would be showing up yet in
And also
NIQ.
growth in velocity, showing how many more cases you've sold this month than like 3 months ago kind of thing.
Which will be a very high number in the early days because you're growing off a smaller
Right,
base. So yeah, like
right.
great numbers to show. Also, like, if you're on this webinar, you're probably starting more kind of like natural channel. If you have a better for you product, you have an advantage because velocities are higher in the natural channel, especially if you get into Whole Foods. So when you're looking at your national performance versus a conventional brand or something, like you're gonna have the advantage. You should be telling that story, and it's like it makes you look better basically because when you get into like a Wegmans, your velocities are much higher there, and you're not in some of the accounts that might actually drag down your velocity. Like, so I don't know, like Safeway can be tough in some regions. So like
Mhm.
even you can get expansion, your velocity goes down because you're expanding into stores that are lower velocity than the Whole Foods, the Sprouts, the ones that you already have. So definitely use that data to your advantage. And then also just in terms of like when you're pivoting the data and trying to tell out your story, just make sure you are really taking the stuff off the table that shouldn't be in there. Like you're in, let's say you get into all the Wegmans, when you get the pull of that, or getting into all the Whole Foods, make sure you pull out of the data anything that's like only in 5 stores. You can look at the ACV column and do that and just filter out SKUs that are only in a couple stores to get rid of the noise. So you can say, I am the number one SKU in the Midwest region in Whole Foods. And by the way, there's a little footnote that I took out any brand that's in fewer than 10% of stores because, whatever. So just make sure you like look at it, clean it, take out some pack sizes, whatever, just like, tell your story well. Emily, it sounds like you guys have done that effectively.
Yeah, no, you want to be accurate first and foremost,
Yes.
and document what you do. But there are different ways to slice the data for sure.
Um,
I was gonna say, Daniel, that's a great plug, I think, for the event that we're hosting in July, unless you had other commentary that you wanted
No,
to.
on just the last thing is I'm just going to post one more time in here the link if you want to talk to the NIQ team. Um, the data is affordable. This is why we partner with NIQ Bizer, and I just really encourage you guys to chat with them because they often will give you a sneak peek at stuff. They really share our mission of supporting early brands and have absolutely revolutionized data accessibility in general. So I just put the link in here one more time. But yes, Kate, yes, let's pump up our grocery run.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, appreciate it. So if you are local to the Chicago area and interested in learning about how to integrate data, more about how to integrate data within your pitch decks, or you just want to make some new friends within the industry, please join us for an evening of networking with Whole Foods and Startup CPG. Would love to keep the conversation going. And as both Daniel and Emily were saying, there are a lot of ways to utilize data, and you don't have to have all of the fancy advanced analytics studies. Those things are great and will can be used to tell compelling narratives, but there are ways to be scrappy and resourceful with a lot of information that's out there, and we would be delighted to help you navigate those conversations.
Can I say a couple things in answering some questions in the chat? Somebody was saying, what if you can't afford an IQ at this point? And I will say, one, that may totally be the case. Two, it looks like there's startup CPG pricing for NiQ Bizer, so definitely check that out. But three, I have found at least that having access to data, if you kind of have the bandwidth to be able to dig in and really understand it, and crunch it in the way that we've been talking about, like pays for itself a million times over. So I would encourage you, if you're prioritizing investments in things, like prioritize investment in data. And then just one thing real fast. Somebody asked about marketing, what slides I would put in at the end. I like to tell retailers how I'm going to support them and make sure that once they put me on their shelf, I'm going to move off. That could be like a whole other webinar, but like I just thinking about our retail pitch deck, I talk about like our 3 primary pillars: promos, demos, and retail media. And I do think that along with data and showing that like you have the traction and you're bringing a new consumer and you are different, all the things that Kate already talked about, showing that you understand that this is like, it takes 2 to tango, goes a really long way, and makes retailers view you as a sophisticated brand and brand partner.
I
But
love
again,
it.
that
And
could be
I
a whole
really,
other webinar.
yes, we need to do more of those also. I really recommend to anyone who like was nodding along like I just was to what Emily was saying, check out our podcast. We have two incredible episodes recently called How to Drive Velocity. One is with sales, the other is with marketing, and they are both some of the best episodes we've ever dropped from super experienced people in those areas who work with emerging brands. So definitely head on over to our podcast and check out those Velocity episodes. Kate, you want to bring us home?
Yeah, no, I pulled up some of them as a startup CPG member for those interested interested in Visor. You have access to exclusive pricing with data offering starting at 1K, but highly affordable. Would love to talk to you about it, and would be happy to sample some insights as part of that continuation of this discussion. So thank you so much to Emily, and thank you to Emily for joining us, Daniel for having us, and thank you all for those that took an hour with us today to talk about how to integrate data within your retailer pitch conversations and drive forward those really meaningful partnerships. We appreciate the time and attention, and look forward to speaking with you all further soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Kate.
everyone.
Thank you,
for
Emily,
the
so much.
the kind messages in the chat. I read them all, and they're very, very sweet. Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Daniel. Thanks, Kate.
Have a
Bye,
great
everyone.
afternoon. Bye.
Bye.